All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a great crowd and turnout so far, so we're excited to have everybody here. Let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Maysel Alami. I work on research and advocacy with the PIPD, which is the Palestinian Institute for Public Diplomacy, who's co-hosting this event with PSC. PIPD is a NGO based in Ramallah. And our aim, our mission, our goal is focused on Palestinian liberation and advancing human rights, freedom, and justice for all. So we're excited to have you all here today under that theme, driving us all, hopefully. So Palestine VR, or virtual reality, is one of the projects that PIPD started about a year ago. And our goal was to allow access or accessibility to people from all around the world to take a look at Palestine. So in case you're not able to visit, whether you're a Palestinian refugee who cannot return or you're elsewhere in the world, we wanted you to get an experience of what Palestinians live under when we say they live under apartheid, occupation, and oppression. I think a lot of the times we hear from news outlets, Twitter, social media, etc., about the reality on the ground and about what it seems like to be a Palestinian, whether it be a refugee who's not able to return, or somebody who's living in Palestine on a daily basis under inhumane and freedom restricting apartheid regime. It is not the same when we witness it on the ground, and it's not the same as when we live it. Of course, this virtual tour is not the same as going there physically, but it brings us a little bit closer to a joint experience, to explore Palestine, to explore what the basically physical and geographic manifestation of occupation and apartheid looks like. So today is actually the second tour of 3. And we're going to be looking specifically at Hebron and at the city of Jerusalem. I think all of us here know that Hebron and Jerusalem have deep historical and religious values to people from all over the world. But they also are 2 cities that I combined together because of how they put across a physical and geographic, as well as ideological representation of what occupation and apartheid looks like. And so that is what we're going to be exploring through the tours today. We're going to start off with Hebron and then move on to Jerusalem. And we have 2 wonderful individuals who are giving us their time, which are Izzat and Zach. They are both Palestinians who have lived in Palestine, who've experienced what it's like to be living under occupation and apartheid. Izzat's going to be speaking to us about Hebron, and Zach is going to be speaking to us about East Jerusalem, which is also an occupied territory. So this is the little spiel at the start. I want to say that we have the chat open for you to talk to each other and to sort of introduce yourself if you want to. But please keep it respectful, keep it within context so that we can use this time to really connect as a community. This is a very lucky and opportune moment for this many people, almost 500 people, to be meeting virtually and exploring something that is of such significance to human freedom. So let's stick to that. And if you have any questions, please do post them in the chat, maybe mark them as a question, and my colleagues will collect these questions and they will we'll have a quick Q&A session at the end. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. If you feel that it is a little bit slow for any reason, please, I would advise that we all, as many of us as possible, turn off our videos. I think that's going to help the internet speed much better. And let me share my screen. Yeah, because I think we have a big number of people on here. So if you are able to switch off your video, it is the icon at the left bottom of your screen, right next to your microphone. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the first tour. So we're going to start off with Hebron. So these tours that we're going to preview are actually conducted by Youth Against Settlements, who Izzat is actually a part of. And they take us around Hebron to show us the physical manifestation of occupation. Hebron is to the south of the West Bank. It is a very historical and religious, it's a city of historical and religious significance. And it was divided into H1 and H2. H1 is under Palestinian control, H2 is under Israeli control. So today we're going to be spending time in H2. Specifically, downtown Hebron and the areas that we're going to look at are quite impactful because they were cities that were highly populated by Palestinians, whether it be their homes, their shops, various sources of their livelihoods that were hollowed out because of occupation, and Palestinians were replaced by Jewish Israeli citizens. Replaced meaning not within their own will. So a lot of the scenes that we're going to be seeing today is a physical sort of proof or an insight into how this transformation has taken place, and now there are very little Palestinian traces to be seen. And then I will share also a little map with you after this so that we can see it visually more. So the first tour we're going to start, Muhannad is giving the tour. It's going to be of the Shohada Street, one of the main streets that separates north and south of Hebron. And what you're seeing right now is actually a checkpoint. A checkpoint that Palestinians have to go through, and you can only get through it actually if you have a permit, and permits are extremely difficult and intricate bureaucratic systems to attain for Palestinians. So most Palestinians can't even get through this. So I'm going to start my tour.
1997, Hebron was divided into H1, H2. H1 is under Palestinian police control. H2 is under Israeli police control. H2, where Israeli settlers live, where Israeli settlers attack Palestinians, also violate the rights of Palestinians every day. So after the massacre, we lost one of the most important parts of the city, and we were victims, and we were punished for being killed. That was the system of the Israeli occupation soldiers inside of the area, just to take over the area. So Shohada Street was closed. The massacre was well planned just to take over the city center from the Palestinian owners. We're talking about now 36,000 Palestinians living inside of the restricted part of H2. They're getting attacked every day by the Israeli settlers and the Israeli soldiers who are living inside here and protecting the Israeli settlers who are living inside of here. They are not protecting the Palestinians, only the settlers.
So as Muhannad told us, this is a highly policed and militarized area. In addition to this main checkpoint, there are various checkpoints, which again, I'll touch base on later on when I share a map with you. And Palestinian movement is extremely restricted, policed, and on many of the main roads, they're actually prohibited from walking or accessing it, be it with a car or in person. The next tour we're taking is going to be at one of the main entrances to the city of Hebron, or old entrances to the city of Hebron. And next to it was a Palestinian school that was occupied and turned into a school exclusively for Jewish Israeli citizens. And it's actually a school that teaches a very extremist curriculum that sort of creates tension and hatred in the area. Muhannad is going to walk us through and also tell us about settler tours that often come through the city and discriminate or harass Palestinian merchants or shop owners that are amongst the streets or on the streets.
Here we are in front of Petromania settlement. Petromania is the second Israeli settlement in Shohada Street. This settlement used to be a Palestinian elementary school called Osama School. 1980, the Israeli military came to the school, kicked the Palestinian kids out of it, and made it as a Jewish school for the Israeli settlers. Unfortunately, this settlement doesn't teach Judaism or this. It teaches the political ideology of Zionism. It has 4 military watching towers watching this entrance, which used to be the third main entrance to Shohada Street. Every Saturday, the settlers have something called the Settlers Tour, or I like to call it the Provocation Tour. They go out from here, go deep in the old city, having a tour, talking about the history of the city, claiming it, with a lot of soldiers protecting them. While doing this tour, they just go out and attack Palestinian shopkeepers. So the shopkeepers, or some of them, prefer to close their shops before the settlers tour goes out. 4 military watching towers, just watching one entrance of Shohada Street. The Palestinians don't have any more access from this entrance. And also, as I said, the Israeli soldiers on the watching towers sometimes harass the Palestinians and shoot sound bombs and tear gas toward the Palestinian passengers. And also the Israeli soldiers go out from here to do patrols inside of the old city to harass Palestinians and make them frustrated to leave this area.
So a common theme that we're going to come across in this tour and the other tours is the military towers or patrolling. So this physical presence that the military, the Israeli military, tries to impose on Palestinians. So they constantly feel like they're watched and they're restricted and they're policed. I think it's, we can only imagine how restrictive of a way of living that is, to feel like you're constantly being watched. Now, this video in specific, this tour is in Beit Romano. I think this video in specific actually impacted me quite a bit. So I'm a Palestinian refugee who's never been to Palestine, so I felt quite emotional when I saw this video. As you can see, there's a fence here. And so in this city, it's actually divided into two parts. The smaller part is where Palestinians are allowed to live, and it's the part that is fenced in. This fence has a door, and basically each morning at 6 in the morning, a police officer or military soldier comes and unlocks the door, and at 10 p.m. he comes back and locks the door again. So as you can imagine, we're going through a global pandemic where our freedom of movement and using our time as we wish has been restricted greatly. We've all been living under curfews and under lockdowns. So I think we can all be empathetic to a lifestyle that is this controlling of our time and of our physical movement on a daily basis. Between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., you are actually physically locked in. So I'll let Muhannad lead and tell you more about it.
We are standing now in front of As-Salama neighborhood. This is a Palestinian neighborhood. It was seized completely by the Israeli military recently. At the beginning, the fence was dividing the street into two parts. The biggest part, which is to the left, was given to the Israeli settlers to use it to cross the street. The Palestinians were given the right side, which is very small, to cross it. So if you are a Palestinian, whatever is your religion, you cannot walk on the left side. So based on your religion, the Israeli military decide where to walk on the street. Also, they have recently extended the fence to lock the whole neighborhood, and 48 Palestinian families who are living inside of the neighborhood are not allowed after 10 p.m. to leave the neighborhood, which means if somebody gets sick, they cannot leave the area. People here are living in jail. And then in the neighborhood, the Israeli military created another jail just to lock them in it. So Palestinians cannot leave the area after 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. So a soldier every night comes at 10 p.m., locks the gate. At 6 a.m., the other soldier comes and opens it. So Palestinians here in this neighborhood receive attacks from the Israeli military and the soldiers. Recently, these houses were attacked several times by the Israeli military, by sound bombs, rubber bullets, and even arresting people and beating them up inside of this neighborhood.
So again, these are policies of restriction that are affecting Palestinians everywhere. I wanted to show you as a map of Hebron to sort of give you a visual representation of what these restrictions look like. So the streets that are red, purple, and blue are actually streets that are not allowed, or Palestinians are prohibited from using them, whether it be by car or by walking, as I mentioned. So you can see that these are all of the main streets, and Palestinians often have to go through longer, more complicated routes that are heavy with checkpoints to be able to move around. So the red dots or circles with the X's and the blue ones are actually checkpoints. So if I zoom out, you can see that there are several just along the Shohada Street, which is one of the main streets of the city. And then as well as the mesh red areas over here, these are also areas that are restricted for Palestinians to go into their mainly Jewish Israeli settlements. So I think this map really shows how Hebron is established geographically as an apartheid regime where people are discriminated against based on their ethno-national identity, which I think is quite not only inhumane, but it's also against international law. So I want to move on now to have to invite Izzat to speak to his experience in in Hebron, what it's like to grow up there, and just share with us whatever he feels suitable.
Like first, Hebron and Jerusalem is the same, so you didn't do any mistakes. So we are happy like to say that like in the beginning.
Thank you.
Let me start to thank all of you over this presentation or lecture, like to talk about the reality here in Hebron and what we are facing as Palestinian here in Hebron. As you know, the life here in Hebron is not that much easy to be under occupation. Let me start with my name and what I'm doing and for whom I'm working. So my name is Izzat Karaki. I'm Palestinian. I live here in Hebron. So I born here and also I grew up here. I don't do that much in my life. I'm working as a blacksmith, but also I am volunteer with Youth Against Settlements since 11 years. So let me say, I know a lot about, the difficulties here in Hebron, which make it, which getting, complicated or difficult all the time. Hebron, as you know, it's the capital of economic of Palestine, but also at the same time, it's the capital of the occupation. So as people who live here in Hebron, we are facing the settlements and the settler and the occupation day by day, or we saw them on our daily life. So that's why it's make it a little bit difficult on us as Palestinians to live here. I think you mentioned a lot of you mentioned a lot about some point which make it more complicated and difficult. But let me explain more and more to the people to understand. I will do my best to show the full image of Hebron. I know the time is not that much, but I will do my best. So as I said, I'm volunteer with Youth Against Settlements, and we are doing we are working so hard against the occupation by non-violence resistance, popular resistance. Youth Against Settlements is a non-partisan group. We are located here in Hebron, and as you know, Hebron is one of the most beautiful city still, even if there is occupation, but really Hebron is very beautiful. We have a lot of things to make us optimistic, the weather, the food, the people itself, the family, everything. I'm pretty sure there's so many people are watching us now, and they tried, for example, maklouba here in Hebron, and which is the main dish for Palestinian here, and it's very nice. So still good. We are happy to talk about Hebron itself. Hebron located on the south of West Bank, 30 kilometers from Jerusalem. Unfortunately, to say it should take half an hour to be in Jerusalem from Hebron to Jerusalem, but now because of occupation it took long time. You don't know 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and sometimes you cannot. So for example, for me as Izzat and most of the activists at Youth Against Settlements are banned, are blacklisted, so we cannot go there and we cannot reach Jerusalem at all. So it's make it difficult and hard to see that. But I'm pretty sure one day this occupation will fall and we can go to Jerusalem easily as the past. So I'm still happy when my father telling me or told me about going to Jerusalem, how it was between Jerusalem and Hebron. So everything will be done soon and occupation will fall. So I want to mention about something very important. As you know, the first settlement established after the war in 1967, it was Kiryat Arba, established in 1969. Kiryat Arba is one of the biggest settlements here in Hebron. I think around 8,500 settlers live on it. And these settlements are, located on a Palestinian territories and a Palestinian land. So they stole the land, and then they are trying to stole everything here in Hebron, because their plan is very clear. So they want to change Hebron from Palestinian, from Palestinian city to the Israeli Jewish community, as they are claiming. We don't expect that, because we know that it's settlements and it's illegal by international law, and by any law it should be illegal, but they are trying to make it legal as much as they can. Kiryat Arba, it's a big story, and we are sad to see these settlements on the top of the mountain, because as you know, Hebron is one of, we have a lot of mountain here in Hebron, and if you look to this mountain, you will see it it's controlled by Israeli, and usually they are trying to have more and more settlements in this mountain. Let me talk about something very, very sad, and something, it changed the history of Hebron. It was in 1994, 25th of February, 1994. Baruch Goldstein, he's a doctor from Brooklyn, 50 years old, get into the mosque during the holy months, during Ramadan months. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. He get into the mosque, and then he shoot 29 Palestinian people and killed them. So he came from Brooklyn, get in, killed Palestinian, and then they punish us, as Muhammad said. So they punished the victims. What they did, they divided the mosque into parts. So 55% as synagogue, and they are use it, and the rest of the place, we are using it as a mosque. Unfortunately, to say, we cannot reach the mosque before, we cannot reach the mosque without passing a checkpoint. So this is something very, very hard on us. And also, if I want to reach my house, I have to pass it through a checkpoint. And to pass it through a checkpoint is not that much easy, because there is a lot of rules you have to do before you get into your house. So let me say, if I want to leave my house, sometimes you have to leave your house several times. Each time you have to leave your house, you have to be checked by the soldier. And it's not about that. They have to check your ID. They have to check your body to let you get into your house. In 2015, they applied a system number. So they give us a number. They change us from a human being to a number. So if you have number, you can reach your house. If not allowed for you to be there. So this is how they are trying to change the human being to numbers. So for example, if I want to invite the rest of my family to my house, I cannot, because they don't have number. So usually I have to go outside to meet them. So 1994, as I said, they destroyed or they divide the mosque, and also they punish the victims. This is what's happened. So after that, by time you see how the situation gets worse and worse. After that, Hebron Protocol in 1997, as you mentioned, Hebron divided into parts, H1 and H2. I will not focus that much about H1. I will talk a little bit more about H2. About H1. I will talk more about H2. H1, it's 80% of Hebron, and as the protocol says, this place should be under Palestinian Authority or under Palestinian control. But unfortunately, we don't see that, because Israeli soldier and the Israeli policemen, they can go to H1 whenever they want. So it's mean all of Hebron under Israeli control. There is nothing under Palestinian Authority. And most of people who got arrested, they are from H1, not from H2. So H2 area, it's 20% of Hebron. We are talking about they divided the city by, having, checkpoint around that place. So H2 area is surrounded by checkpoints. We are talking about 22 checkpoints. So in the around H2 area, and also we are talking about 120 watchtower and camera. And there is several settlements on the city center of Hebron, and also most of these settlements are inhabited or located in Shohada Street, where it's not allowed for Palestinian to walk, where it's not allowed for us as Palestinian to use our shops, to use our houses. So it's make a lot for us. So usually for me, as I said, what I'm doing with Youth Against Settlements, we give a tour for international, to show them the reality about Hebron. But unfortunately, at some point, we will tell them, okay, that's it. You have to continue by yourself, because we don't have rights as Palestinians to continue with you. I don't know how it's worked to be in my own city, to be in my own street, to be in my own neighborhood, but I cannot continue. But the people who came from US or from UK or from anywhere, they can go and they can walk freely. But for the people who lived here, they cannot. And also something very important, they are trying like to change the history of Hebron. So now if you come to Hebron, you will see everything, you know, Hebrew. So there is nothing in Arabic. They changed the name of the street. They changed the name of the neighborhood from Palestinian Arabic name to the Israeli settlers name. So they are trying like to kick Palestinian and to make them leave the area, because really they have like big plan like to kick all Palestinian from their hand and from their houses. So in Shohada Street, it's only around 2 kilometers, and as you mentioned, like it's the main street. It's supposed to be main street in Hebron because it's connected, or it's you know, connect north and south of Hebron like together. But now it's closed and shut down. It's only 2 kilometers. In these 2 kilometers, like you can see, you know, something very big. So we are talking about more than 1,800 shops are closed. Also, you are talking about over 1,000 house or apartment are empty. Palestinians cannot use their homes, cannot use their shops because settlers are living there. So when I'm saying like Hebron is the capital of occupation, because, and also we are having, you know, the same situation with Jerusalem, and our life is difficult more than the other people because we are living in same neighborhood and sometimes we are living in the same building. So that's why it makes sense. Yeah. Muhammad told you about one of the settlements, which is called, you know, Petromania Settlements. This settlements was, you know, Palestinian school, but unfortunately in 1980, they changed it from Palestinian school to the Israeli yeshiva school, and they don't teach them about Judaism, as they say. Really, like they are teaching them about apartheid, discrimination, unequal, and they don't see us as normal human being. So we have several settlements in the middle of Hebron. For example, we have Beit Hadassah. Beit Hadassah, it owns by, you know, Palestinian and Jewish family, and they were living together. So we don't have any problem with, you know, with religious stuff. So we are happy like to have Judaism here and to have Jew here in Hebron. And if you look to the history of Hebron, like you will see that we were living together. So the problem with the settlements, with the settlers, with the occupation, with apartheid, so that is it. And all this is under occupation. So Beit Hadassah, then in 1979, they changed it from they changed it because after it was, you know, Palestinian family, Palestinian Jewish family, then it was, you know, a hospital. After hospital, they changed it from hospital to a settlement. So we have several settlements on the middle of Hebron, and the number of the settlers, like, it's not that much big. Like we are only talking about a few hundred settlers who are living in the city center of Hebron. They need more than 1,500 soldiers to protect them. And unfortunately, to say something very important, we are not equal by law. So for me, as is that, because I'm Palestinian, I'm under military law, and the illegals and the illegal settlers who came like from, you know, from outside of, you know, outside of Palestine, like they are under civil law. So that's mean a lot for us as Palestinians, like to see that, because they don't treat us as normal human beings. So in 2014, it was a conference for the settlers. They claimed even if we got a solution, or if the occupation done, we are not equal we are not equal with anyone. So we should be, you know, first level, and then Palestinian comes, because they are the chosen people. This is what they said. The God chose them, and they are holy people, and that's why like they have to be like in first level, and then we come after that. So after Hebron Protocol, as I mentioned, like we have a lot of, you know, big points like H1, H2, and they divided the city. After that, you know, Second Intifada happened in 2000. They closed the rest of the city. So, and now, you know, most of the families, like they couldn't use their home, they couldn't use, and also they put checkpoint. So for example, if you ask about H2 area, we don't have an ambulance. We don't have hospital in H2 area. So you don't have even like basic rights like to live. So we cannot use our car. We cannot, for example, you have to have fence all over your house. If not, like you will suffer a lot from that. Mm-hmm. And also, you know, But on the other hand, like you see settlers, like they have everything. They have transportation, they have, they have a free apartment, they have free, electricity. All this, support come from an organization called Hebron Fund. This organization, located on US and Brooklyn. So they collected money and then they said, they send this money to the settlers who live here. So that's why, like you see them got everything for nothing. They don't have to pay. So most of the settlers who are living here, unfortunately, they are Zionists. They don't, they don't respect us as normal human beings. So for example, I'm sitting now in a room. If I go outside, it will be the fence between me and between the settlers. So, but unfortunately, we are living in the same neighborhood. We are living in the same area, but we are not equal. So Shohada Street, like, because of the heart of the city, after they closed that street, like they destroyed the city. So now you see people, very sad, and also like there is no sorry, I forgot the word. So there is no, it's okay. So there is no economic. So there is no economic here in the city. That's why, like you see that. After I told you like about 1,800 shops closed and the houses are empty, people are, they are trying like to make the area, more difficult and more complicated, and they are trying like to make it, dangerous. So that's why, like you see, or you saw how many people got killed, got killed on the checkpoint. So we have so many people, unfortunately, to say that we have so many people are afraid to come to the area. Believe me, there is Palestinian, they live here in Hebron, but they never have been in the old city or in H2 area because of the difficulties and how much is it, difficult for Palestinians to be there. So a few settlers, a few hundred settlers, and we are talking about almost like 45,000 Palestinians live in H2 area. This few hundred settlers, they have rights more than all these people who are living at that neighborhood. So also, like, let me talk about.
We have a little bit of a crunch, but we got many questions for you in the chat that I've saved, and we will talk more. There are specific questions to your experience about medical services, access, the number system, etc., that we would love to hear more from you about towards the end. بس خلينا نوقف هون we'll come back. تمام. Thank you so much. I think everything you said is so telling of the apartheid regime that we're talking about, the restrictions, the inability to access basic human resources, the way in which cities were hollowed out of Palestinians, زي ما حكيت, as you said, in a way that really it's basically like erasure. They're erasing Palestinian history, Palestinian existence, Palestinian identity as well. And while Palestinians still remain in these spaces, lacking this historic and meaningful context. We'll definitely come back to everyone as well. Last week in our tour, which is saved, the life is saved on the PSC Facebook page. We can share the links with you to that. We did a little tour that was taken by another individual who is an ex-military Israeli soldier, who shows us the other side, which is basically like a ghost town that is what that used to be a bustling market. So if you want to see it, go check that out, or check Rabit or PIPD's YouTube channel for more tours. So I'm going to end the Hebron tour here, and we're going to move on to the Jerusalem tour. Izzat, thank you again, and we'll come back to you with the questions later on. All right, so the Jerusalem tour, we're going to start off with two significant religious markers that everybody, or one of the most well-known markers in the world. We're going to start with the Dome of the Rock, and we're going to have Professor Ali Klebo take us there. Then we're moving on to a more sort of contextualizing tour with Daniel Seidman, who's going to talk to us about the politics, the ongoing oppression and occupation in Jerusalem. While it does not look exactly geographically the same as Hebron, perhaps not as many internal checkpoints and restricted areas, East Jerusalem is still occupied. And there is almost this ideological separation between Jewish Israelis as well as Palestinians. And Jewish Israelis often have privileges and rights and laws that allow them to flourish, both personally, economically, as well as politically in terms of political votes and participation, while Palestinians in Jerusalem are highly restricted, whether it be by the Jerusalem ID, their ability to own land, to build homes for themselves, to move across Palestine and outside of Palestine as well. And we're also going to talk a little bit about settlements and how that has dictated the one-state reality in Palestine. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Professor Ali Klebo.
I'm Ali Klebo, doctor in anthropology and a specialist in the social history in Jerusalem. Moreover, I come from one of the patrician families of Jerusalem. We have come with the early Muslim openings and have been here from the 7th century. Jerusalem has always been the center and the focal point in Islam. It's one of the 3 holy cities, not hierarchical order, but dialectic, whereas Mecca addresses itself to the Abrahamic discourse. Medina centers around the Prophet Muhammad. Jerusalem is about the connection between man and God.
So as you can see, this is the yard or the outside area of the Dome of the Rock. It's a beautiful space that means much to a lot of people across the world. We're going to take a little bit of a tour into the inside of the Dome of the Rock.
We're now in the Dome of the Rock. The dome is the dome, of course, the mosque itself, the building. The rock is the holy rock where Prophet Muhammad connected with God in the night, during the night journey. The night journey is composed, of course, of 2 parts. The horizontal trip from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then the spiritual ascension, the connection with God took place here.
So now we're going on to a tour of the Holy Church of the Sepulchre. And
okay, we are now in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I come here and it has many memories for me. My grandfather, my uncles have always had the custody of the key of the Holy Sepulchre. We have been here, the Muslim family that has the custodianship of the key of the Holy Sepulchre, the supervising of the opening and closing of the gate.
All right, so that was the more religious aspect of Jerusalem. We're going now with Professor Ali Klebo to Old Jerusalem. This is quite an important and impactful video because he walks us through the old city, and he's going to show us or talk to us about settlements and about how Israeli Jewish citizens are able to claim, if they're able to show proof that they owned the house prior to 1948, they can force the expulsion of Palestinians from their own homes and allow the Jewish Israeli citizens to settle into these homes. While on the other hand, the Palestinian and Palestinian refugees in 1948 are not granted the same rights or the same privileges. As many of you know, Palestinian refugees from 1948 are actually unable to return to Palestine. And I myself, as I mentioned, I'm a 3rd generation Palestinian refugee who would struggle to go back and access my own grandparents' lands and homes. So this is quite an impactful moment.
We're totally under siege in Jerusalem. Settlers move into the city. It's the attempt to Judaize the city, change the character of the Muslim, Arab character of the city into Jewish. Moving on at great speed, we see settlers everywhere, and bureaucratic measures are used to evacuate the houses of their tenants, empty them out, and substitute them with Jewish tenants. The whole process of taking over the properties is follows four stages. First is the law that any tenant that is living in an old Jewish home that has been abandoned during the wars in 1948, they have the right to come back and appropriate it, find various reasons to evacuate, to evict the tenants.
So Professor Ali here talks a little bit about what I mentioned previously. What I want us next to move on to is the tour by Daniel Steedman. He's going to take us into the city, which is, I think, north of the old city, and talk to us more about the occupation of East Jerusalem and the reality on the ground between Jewish Israeli citizens and Palestinians.
We're standing along Route number 1, the major north-south thoroughfare in Jerusalem, immediately to the north of the old city. This was the Green Line, the armistice line between Israel and Jordanian-occupied East Jerusalem between 1949 and 1967. This is not only a historical border, it's a contemporary one, because contrary to myth, Jerusalem is as divided today as ever it has been since 1967. Israelis do not venture into almost all of East Jerusalem, and Palestinians rarely venture into West Jerusalem. We walk different streets, we speak a different language, we shop in different shops, we go to different schools. But the major border between East and West Jerusalem cannot be seen with the naked eye. It is a political boundary. To our west are the Israeli neighborhoods of Israeli Jerusalem. And to our east, the Palestinian neighborhoods of occupied East Jerusalem. The folks who live in the Israeli sector are politically empowered. They're citizens. They have political rights. They have the right to vote. They have passports. The Palestinian sector of East Jerusalem is permanently politically disempowered.
So I'm going to end this part on here, on the note of political and economic disempowerment of Palestinians living in occupied East Jerusalem in comparison to Jewish Israeli citizens. Next, we're going to move on to the next tour by Daniel Steedman, who's going to talk to us more about the settlements and the evacuation of Palestinians from their homes in East Jerusalem, and what sort of reality that creates when we talk about a one-state or two-state solution when it plays out on the ground.
We are now located in the Palestinian neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah in occupied East Jerusalem, immediately to the east of the Green Line. There are two kinds of settlements in Jerusalem. There are the large settlement neighborhoods, like French Hill and Ramot with 215,000 residents. And then there are enclaves that are biblically motivated, with settlers being implanted inside existing Palestinian neighborhoods. This is one such enclave. However, things are changing. And there are now so many government schemes that there will be radical changes in the near future here in Sheikh Jarrah. First, there will be a territorial change. There are so many projects that within 3, 4, or 5 years, the Sheikh Jarrah settlement will no longer be an enclave, but will be an extension of pre-67 Israel, making the creation of a border in Jerusalem inordinately more difficult and not impossible. In addition, for the first time, we, Israel, are engaging in large-scale evictions of Palestinians here in Sheikh Jarrah, based on the claim that the properties belonged in the past to Jews prior to the 1948 war. Under the Israeli law, Jews who owned property may recover them. Palestinians who lost property in the war may not. Now, this is not returning property to its original owners. This is a platform for continued settlement expansion. As a result of that, there have been more than 25 eviction proceedings filed by the government of Israel against Palestinians. So we are confronting here in Sheikh Jarrah not only a territorial meltdown, but a humanitarian meltdown. And I would like to remind everyone that the forceful displacement of the civilian population under occupation is a gross violation of international law.
So I think this video, as I mentioned, is a very strong reminder of the ways in which Palestinians are being expelled from their homes and their lands are being annexed, so that as many Palestinians as possible are restricted to as little land as possible, erasing them both geographically and their identity. So this is also changing the reality on the ground for the two-state solution that was previously a viable option, showing that Palestinians are geographically becoming very fragmented and fractured in a way that is not, there's no reality within which there is a solid space for them to build a state of their own. So next we're going to move on again with Steedman in our last tour of Jerusalem to a refugee camp, and this will be impactful in talking about UNRWA as well as the state in which Palestinians often have to live without basic support for municipal support such as water and etc.
We're overlooking the Shurfat refugee camp, which is the one refugee camp inside the city of Jerusalem. On the ridge in back of me, there are about 60,000 souls, 30,000 of whom live inside the refugee camp. And you'll note that the refugee camp, even though it's inside Jerusalem, has been cut off from Jerusalem by the wall, and the residents have to go through a checkpoint in order to enter the city in which they live. Nowhere is the myth of undivided eternal Jerusalem under Israeli rule more hollow and more fictitious than in the refugee camp. There has been no Israeli presence in the camp since 1967, except for a military or paramilitary presence. There are no water meters. There are no municipal services. There's no trash collection by the municipality itself. It's outsourced. That has been the case since 1967. It is far more the case today, because when the wall went up, even the rudimentary services that had been provided in the past all but collapsed. The only semblance of governance in the refugee camp is provided by UNRWA, and the Trump administration has targeted UNRWA by defunding it. So the one body in the world that gives any kind of services in the refugee camp is about to have a financial meltdown, and there's nobody to fill the void. Apparently, the Trump administration believes that if you move the embassy to Jerusalem, Jerusalem is off the table, and if you defund UNRWA, the refugee problem doesn't exist. There's only one problem. The 30,000 residents of the refugee camp behind me haven't been told, or if they've been told, they don't agree. They insist that they exist. Neither the issue of Jerusalem nor the issue of refugees is going to go away.
So with that, we're going to end the tour. I think for many of us who have been following the news, we know about the defunding of UNRWA by the Trump administration and the financial crisis that UNRWA is actually going through right now. This heavily impacts Palestinian refugees across the world, in Palestine and outside of Palestine, who seek UNRWA's assistance and support as perhaps the only way in which they can sustain a very basic humane life, as he said, such as facilities of trash collection, municipal services, as well as other sources of livelihood. So that video was quite impactful for me personally when I watched it, to realize the extent of to which defunding UNRWA is a grave process to the livelihoods of Palestinian refugees. So with that, I want to invite Zach to talk to us a little bit more, share his experience as a Jerusalemite living in East Jerusalem, and contextualize all of this for us a bit more through his perspective. Zach, I pass it on to you. I don't know.
Thank you, Mais. Thank you, Mais, and thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for the invitation. I think, I mean, between Dr. Ali Klebo and Danny Seideman, they pretty much covered the reality of Jerusalem. I'll add a bit of my perspective on it, but indeed, I mean, the city itself, I mean, we talked about the separation, what separation looks like within, but also how Israel has managed to separate Jerusalem from its sister cities of Ramallah and Bethlehem. I mean, Bethlehem is 7 kilometers away from Jerusalem. Many people consider Jerusalem, at least at the time of my father and my uncles and my aunts, you know, family members who lived in Bethlehem and Ramallah, who used to kind of come to Jerusalem on a daily basis. Jerusalem was the cultural, commercial, religious, social center for Palestinians. And it was, you know, a place where people visited on a daily basis. Today, that reality is completely different. You have walls, you have checkpoints, you have layers of a very strict permit regime and control regime that prohibits the natural kind of expansion of Bethlehem towards Jerusalem and Ramallah towards Jerusalem, and the intermixing of the populations. So in many ways, unfortunately, Israel has managed to really seal off Jerusalem from its Palestinian sister cities. And, you know, as Daniel mentioned, I mean, an interesting statistic is that 75% of the Palestinian population in Jerusalem lives under the poverty line. A significant number of this population lives in the refugee camps that Daniel talked about in the video. And you look at these camps, they're not on a vast piece of land. And, you know, you have this kind of very tall buildings because people, you know, I mean, you have to go up if you don't have land to go kind of expand on the land. And it's just that the living conditions are unbearable. And, you know, there's no police, Israeli police or municipal services don't reach this territory. And the Palestinian police and service providers are prohibited by Israel from attending to this territory as well. So in many ways, it's really like a neglected island, and you know, it's just like a very problematic area to live in. The issue is that people need to live there to maintain their Jerusalem ID status. If you leave Jerusalem, including these areas that are kind of walled off, and you go and say live in Ramallah or live in Bethlehem or buy a place somewhere in the West Bank because it's cheaper, you know, and somehow the authorities discover this about you, you end up losing your, you know, there's going to be a process of basically losing your rights to the city. That means your right to live there, your right to receive medical care as an East Jerusalemite. And I have family members who actually went through this ordeal and had to actually relocate from their West Bank residences back to Jerusalem and fight through the courts to kind of reclaim that right that people should be born with and should be, you know, inseparable regardless of where you live. I think within Jerusalem itself, within the boundaries, you know, I think over the past 10 years, there is an uptick of building permits given by the municipality to Palestinians to build in Palestinian areas. It's quite limited still. The problem with this is because at some point there was no place to live in East Jerusalem, that you ended up going for Palestinians to the West Bank, and you ended up, going through this kind of process of losing your ID and so on. The issue today is that an apartment in Jerusalem costs between $350,000 to $400,000, and we're talking about 100 square meters, so not a big place, 3 bedrooms. And much of the population, if we look at the statistic that 75% of the population lives below the poverty line, cannot afford it. So what do these people do? Where do they go? And if they do end up going towards the West Bank and so on, then again, you're losing your right to the city as defined by Israel. There are also people who end up maybe getting a job abroad who have a Jerusalem ID and want to try life elsewhere. I have a friend who has been doing this in Canada, for example. And if you go beyond 3 years, all of a sudden, you pop up on the Israeli system that you're an Arab Jerusalem ID holder who's not in Jerusalem. And then the process begins to kind of, again, strip you of your right to come back. And if, after say maybe 5 to 7 years, you're still abroad and you're kind of spotted in the system, you then end up with a serious risk of coming back to your own city as a tourist. And Israel could begin the process of stripping you of your Jerusalem ID, basically your birthright to come back to your city. So friends and family who are at the moment trying life abroad suffer from this extremely high risk of basically not being able to come back if they change their mind and want to come back. Obviously, for Israeli Jews who want to go live in the US for 15 years, 10 years, or Europe or wherever, you can come back whenever you want, and that right is preserved. And again, I mean, even the better kept neighborhoods that are within kind of the Israeli municipalities' kind of direct responsibility, the services are quite limited. I remember, and this is an anecdote that I'm sharing, just last month, a couple of friends of mine wanted to play basketball in a court. The court was extremely dirty, it had glass and so on. And I don't know why, but I decided to email the municipality to say, can you please come and clean the court? And I got a call from them a couple of weeks later and said, well, it's your responsibility to clean the court. In terms of, I mean, very basic things like that just give you an idea of how neglected the eastern part of the city is. In terms of parks, I mean, I have to take my 2 daughters to places on the west side to go have fun in the parks, because you don't have parks for children. And when you do have a park that's kind of funded by the municipality, it's just congested because everybody goes there. So it's in that sense, I mean, there is this kind of fictional divide that Daniel was talking about. You don't see it in your eye, but if you live in Jerusalem, you kind of see the difference when you walk into Israeli neighborhoods, how well maintained they are, how well serviced they are. And then you go to, at least where I live, and you see, a different reality. Even though, I mean, the Israelis sometimes give you a park here and there, but as I said, it's not compatible with the needs of the population. Let me stop there with this contribution. I'm happy to take answers, and once again, thank you for the invitation.
Of course, thank you so much, Zak. That was very informative, and while you were speaking, I was reading some of the comments, and people are saying, this is sort of like how this population or that population or this marginalized community or that in this country is being treated. And I think one of the approaches a lot of Palestinians are beginning to have, and also PIPD, is this intersectional approach to saying the reality on the ground in Palestine is a reality of apartheid, oppression, and occupation that we've seen historically, but it's also the reality of policing and militarization and violence against Palestinians that we see sort of hints of across the world, whether it be in the US or the UK or elsewhere, or even apartheid in South Africa. So I think what you share with us, this differentiation, whether it be a physical, geographic, ideological, is definitely a result of all of that. So I think we're going to move on to the question and answer segment. I'm going to start off with some questions to you, Izzat, from earlier on. So we had a question from Anne, I think, that said that you've mentioned that it is prohibited if you're prohibited from visiting Jerusalem. Is this because of your ID card? And is this because you're an activist, because of the work you do? And perhaps, Izzat, when you're talking, maybe also talk about the number system you mentioned a little bit, and what the ID system means in general for mobility, for you to move around. And then I'll pose the next question. Thank you.
Yeah, that is very important question, because, you know, as Palestinian, especially like the Palestinian who live in West Bank, so we have two kind of, you know, ID. So there's some Palestinian get, you know, Jerusalem citizenship, and they have, you know, the blue ID. But for us as Palestinian, like, we have the green ID. So we cannot go to Jerusalem until we got a permit from, you know, the Israeli government. So for me, like, I remember when I was a child, maybe 8 or 9 years old, I went to Jerusalem with my school, but then I never have been there. I'm blacklisted or I'm banned, I think, because of my activism with Youth Against Settlements. And as I mentioned, like, most of the activists here are the same. And we have so many Palestinians, like, they couldn't reach Jerusalem and they cannot visit. And also some Palestinian, you know, they can apply for permit or permission, then they can visit Jerusalem. And we have some Palestinian who got, you know, permission, like, to work there in Jerusalem, and also to work, like, you know, in Haifa, Yafa, Akko. Really, like, it's my dream as Palestinian, like, to be there. You know, if you ask me what is my dream right now, I want to go to Al-Aqsa Mosque and pray there. Unfortunately to say, like, I have been, like, abroad outside of Palestine for so many time. I have been in Italy, in Sweden, in different countries, but 30 kilometers from now, I couldn't go because of that permission. And also about system number, this is something, you know, I think it's very clear, and everyone, like, should understand, like, what I mean. So for example, like, my name right now with you is that, but unfortunately at the checkpoint, my name is 101. So if I go to the checkpoint, they will ask me about, you know, my number, not about my name. So this is something very important, and, you know, it's touch you from inside, like, to see that, but they don't respect, or they don't expect that. And this is the system. So you will not get to your house or to your apartment or to your shop or to your neighborhood until you mention your number. That is something, like, very, you know, something, you know, very, you know, make you sad from inside. And also, unfortunately to say, when they apply or when they collected the people who are living in H2 area, like, to give them number, some of the family has been outside of their homes, they don't get number. So the day when they apply that number, so the people come to the checkpoint, then, like, they don't have number, so they couldn't reach their homes because they don't have, you know, number at the checkpoint. And unfortunately to say, all the checkpoint around H2 area, it's a smart checkpoint. They have camera, they can know you from your face or from your eyes. So before you get in, they will know if you are registered or not. If not, so they will make it complicated and hard and difficult for you as Palestinian, like, to reach your home or to reach your neighborhood.
Absolutely. Thank you, Izzat. Another question, and I think I'll have you speak to it, and maybe Zach, you speak to it a little bit more, but a lot of people are wondering about life under COVID, obviously, but also as well how the healthcare system looks like for wherever you live. Because you mentioned a little bit about not being able to access ambulances during very urgent and emergency situations. So if you can speak a little bit about that, and then Zach will come back to you more on that as well.
Yeah, I think like, I don't know if you remember or if you read about, the demolish. They demolished like the test where people do test in Hebron, in the entrance of Hebron. The Israeli came and they demolished like that center because it was like on Area C, as they claimed. So not allowed for Palestinian Authority or not allowed for our government like to have that kind of place like to test people. And medical system here, like unfortunately, like it's terrible. Like there is nothing here in H2, and as I told you, like we don't have ambulance here, we don't have hospital in H2 area. So if I want like to go to the hospital, I have to go to H1. So this is something very clear, and everyone can see it. And they make it, unfortunately, like to say, they make it very complicated and difficult. Like you can see, the settlers, like they got everything they want. For a few hundred settlers, like they have, I think, 3 ambulances, but for 35,000 Palestinians who live in H2, 35,000 Palestinians who live in H2 area, like we don't have an ambulance here. So this is something like unbelievable. There is no accountability for that. They can do whatever they want without getting, without think about that. And something very important you have to know, that we are, we are, facing them all the time. For example, like if you ask for an ambulance, maybe the ambulance will get the permit like to be in Shohada Street or in Tel Armida, where it's not allowed for Palestinians to drive. But we have several times, or it's happened like several times, when settlers lay their bodies on the street like to prevent the ambulance from reaching the family, and it's documented. So if you search like over YouTube or Google, you will see like real videos or real movie about that, and to see how settlers are laying their bodies on the street like to prevent the ambulance. And we have so many people, unfortunately, we have so many people died over that. We have a guy, his name is Hashim Al-Azzi. He got killed, he died like in 2015. It was the classes at the checkpoint, which is the main checkpoint in Hebron. Then the Israeli soldier shooted like maybe 100 of tear gas. So then the tear gas came to his house. He got heart attack. So we called the ambulance. The ambulance cannot reach, so we have to carry him by our hand. When we went to the ambulance, or when we reached the ambulance, he was died between us because of the soldier prevented the ambulance from being at that area or at that place.
I'm muted. Yes, absolutely, Izzat. Thank you so much. I think what you are talking about shows that the medical scarcity and lack of medical service provision to Palestinians is not something that is rising right now under COVID. It's something that has existed for years, and apartheid does not only represent itself physically or geographically, it also represents itself through these ways in which Palestinians are not offered the same life-threatening or the same services that are needed for their lives and for their healthyhood. So Zach, I'm going to bring you in into the conversation a little bit with the questions. If you want to talk about the health care situation in Jerusalem a little bit, and later on in the context of what Izzat just mentioned, if you can tell us a little bit about Iyad al-Haq, about his story, and how his body was also traumatized in the ways that Izzat has just mentioned in relevance to Jerusalem.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows that Israel is leading the drive to vaccinate its population. It's, 3 times more effective than the second in the list, I think, is Bahrain. But just a few kilometers away, you have an entire population that is yet to receive any form of vaccine. And it's not likely going to receive the vaccine anytime soon before March. And by then, probably Israel would have vaccinated a vast majority of its population. So the COVID situation in Palestine is not great. And I think, Israel has a responsibility to play its role as as the entity that that controls, exactly, as the occupying entity that's controlling basically everything that comes in and out of Palestine. So there is obvious discrimination there. And, you know, I mean, I think the theme here is that we really wanted to shed light on the strifes and the struggles that we go through in our daily lives. I mean, Azzat spoke about Hebron and how segregated it is, and how obviously everything is kind of architected to give Israeli settlers the upper hand in the quality of life, and then the Palestinians are just kind of managed in a way that is offers as least inconvenience as possible to Israeli settlers. And I mean, in Jerusalem, it's a different kind of a form of discrimination as well, where you don't have the same services, you don't have the same, attention from the authorities that are controlling basically everything that goes around. So we are living in a system of kind of discrimination where, you know, one people are living a much better life or provided with a much better life than another people. But I think for the future, we have a lot of reasons to be hopeful. I think people know more today thanks to social media and thanks to, the visibility that, whomever wants to be blind will be blind, but whomever wants to see is able to see through these platforms. And I think, there is hope for the future. At least I'm hopeful, because if I'm not, then I'm failing my own children. So despite the discrimination, despite the difficulty of life under occupation and the segregation that comes with this tiny place, we have to be hopeful in order to kind of create a better future for all of us, where, equality and freedom are really what matter. And, you shouldn't live your life here based on where you were born, what religion you were born into, and what's your mother language. Every person here has a right to live equally. And, it's about time that this kind of system of control is kind of disintegrated. And with this hopeful message, I leave it back to you.
Thank you, Zach, very much, and for leaving us on a positive note. I think the very fact that there are this many people joining our sessions, eager to learn more about Palestine and eager to spread what they're learning with everybody else, is also a source of hope under all that is happening. So this is the wrap up for our second tour. I'm so grateful to have had everybody join us on this tour, and I'm looking forward to our next tour, which is going to be on the 18th of January, which is next Monday at the same time. So that's 8:30 Palestine time, 8:30 p.m., 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and then 6:30 p.m. UK time. We're going to be seeing 2 or 3 other cities that will be curated in a similar way. And we hope that you tell more of your family and your friends and your communities to join. And we will also be saving all of these tours as videos so that you may be able to rewatch them again or share them with your friends and family and communities. And we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, Zach and Izzat, again, so much for your time and your valuable input, and for PSC and the Rabit team for putting this together. Thank you, everyone.